Here is a follow-up video to a video I made about a week ago about whether or not to use a dry concrete mix instead of a wet concrete mix for your small projects. And are going to try using this dry pour method anyway. Now, the number one problem I see on the internet that has a high probability of failure, whether you're using a dry mix or a wet mix, will be to make the concrete pads at least 3.5 inches thick. Because I've already seen a couple that turned out just fine in the video, but I don't think are going to work in the long run. My next idea would be to raise the form boards up a little bit so that when you're watering your concrete slab, that it will create some type of a container that will allow most of the water to go through the concrete. Because there were a couple of videos that I came across with a concrete slab that wasn't very strong because the water hadn't soaked through it. And if you don't raise the forms, it wouldn't be a bad idea to be careful when you're wetting the concrete to prevent any water from going over the edge of the form boards. Because if water's going over the form boards, there's a good chance that the cement is also going over the form boards, and that's not going to help your finish. Now, if you do want a smoother finish, here's something else that might work. And that would be to screed all of the rocks down to where they're about 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch lower than the form boards. And then add a layer of Portland cement. The Portland cement should allow you to get a smoother finish or even a nicer broom finish if that's something you're interested in doing. If not, then you could end up with a rougher finish. But again, this might not be a problem for you, especially if you're not planning on finishing the concrete at all with any types of trowels to smooth out the concrete or to round off the edges. Another thing I would definitely suggest doing, I just watched a video where somebody placed a dry mix on top of some wood chips. And over time, these wood chips can decompose and create a void or an area that's underneath your concrete that will no longer be supporting the concrete pad. Make sure that everything you build is on top of a solid foundation or well-compacted soil. I cannot stress this enough, because if you're looking for cracks, soil erosion, tree roots, and uncompacted soil are probably going to be at the top of the list. And of course, why not throw some rebar in there or some type of a wire mesh, something that you're going to use for a wet concrete mix to see if that will help increase the strength. And if you're using a 3.5 inch thick slab, the rebar will be placed somewhere in the center. And you could probably position the rebar after filling up about 1 inch, 1.5 inches of dry mix in your forms, and then simply setting the rebar on top of that and then filling it up the rest of the way. And the last thing I want to point out is that most of these pre-mix bags are rated at about 2,000 to 2,500 pounds per square inch. Here's what a square inch looks like, 1 inch by 1 inch. Even if you're only getting 500 pounds per square inch with your dry mix concrete, that might be enough for your project. So keep that in mind also. Now, the last thing I want to say in this video is that I am not 100% convinced that we need to hit something like this with a sledgehammer or drive a truck over it. Because if all you're going to do is put a chicken coop on top of it, and you're never or rarely ever going to step on it, then something like this might work fine. But if you're going to do that, why not just form something up and fill it with gravel and avoid using concrete, whether wet or dry mixed? And for me, I'm not 100% convinced that this is the best way to go for anything, including a small concrete pad, until one of these products tells you in their directions that you're allowed to use the dry pour concrete method and tells you what you can use that method for.